want you to close your eyes for a second and just picture a university campus.
Okay.
You walk into the physics building and everything just feels, I don't know, settled, tidy. They have the standard model. They know the particles. They know the forces.
Right.
They can predict exactly what an atom will do if you smash it into another one. It's elegant.
It's a solved puzzle in a lot of ways, or,
Yeah.
the edges are all filled in at least.
Right. But then you walk across the quad to, say, the psychology department or sociology or even biology, and it feels completely different.
Oh, yeah.
It feels a bit like the Wild West. You have neuroscientists looking at cells, psychologists looking at behavior, sociologists looking at groups, and it feels like they aren't even speaking the same language.
That is the fundamental problem, isn't it? These scientific silos.
Mm-hmm.
We have these completely isolated islands of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So the biologist sees a chemical reaction, the psychologist sees a mood, the sociologist sees a cultural trend,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all describing the exact same reality, but they don't have a unified map to connect the dots.
It's so fragmented. But we have two papers in front of us today that are trying to do something. Well, something pretty audacious. They're trying to burn those silos down.
They really are.
Proposing a grand unification, basically. A way to connect the raw physics of chaos to the complex architecture of, well, the human personality.
It is incredibly ambitious stuff.
Mm.
We're looking at a unified theory of emergent complexity on one hand and a standard model of the mind on the other.
Wow.
And basically, the authors are arguing that the rules governing, say, a star system or a single cell are the exact same rules governing your personality.
Specifically, how you handle stress and ambition and all that.
Exactly. How you handle life.
So our mission today is to figure out how chaos becomes order and how our personalities are essentially just mass interacting with energy.
Correct. But a fair warning. To understand the psychology, we have to start with the physics.
Of course.
We have to understand the engine before we can even think about driving the car.
Okay, let's get into the engine then. This first source, the theory of emergent complexity, it hits you right away with a concept that feels totally counterintuitive. The open systems axiom.
It sounds super technical, but it's actually pretty profound.
Yeah.
The axiom just states that complexity.
Yeah.
Well, it cannot exist in isolation. If you close a system off, if you stop the flow of energy and information, it dies. It just hits equilibrium.
See, that's the part that tripped me up. Equilibrium. In my daily life, I'm always trying to find balance. I want peace. I want equilibrium. But this theory says that for a living system, equilibrium is actually the enemy.
Thermodynamically speaking,
Yep.
yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Total equilibrium is maximum entropy. It's when your coffee cup cools down to room temperature and, well, nothing ever happens again. That's death.
Yeah.
Living systems, whether it's a cell or a human mind, they rely on chronic disequilibrium.
Chronic disequilibrium. It sounds like a medical diagnosis you really don't want to get.
I know, it sounds stressful. But think about it biologically for a second. Your brain consumes, what, roughly 20% of your body's metabolic energy?
Right. A huge amount.
And it's not doing that just to process conscious thoughts. A huge chunk of that energy is spent just maintaining electrical gradients.
So basically keeping the battery charged.
Exactly. It's spending all this energy to keep itself off balance, to keep those neurons polarized and just ready to fire. If the brain hit true electrical equilibrium, those gradients would flatten out and you'd be brain dead.
Wow.
So the big takeaway here is that tension isn't some bug in the system. Tension is the fuel.
Okay, so we are actually wired to be off balance. We're wired to solve problems.
We have what the source calls an intrinsic drive axiom. As soon as we resolve one tension, the system naturally, it seeks out the next one. We aren't built to sit still. We're built to process a flow of energy.
I mean, if we're constantly in this state of disequilibrium, why don't we just explode? If I'm surfing a wave of constant energy, how do I stay standing?
That is the million-dollar question. And the paper outlines a specific generative mechanism, a 5-step process that turns all that chaotic energy into actual structure.
Okay.
You've got step 1, chronic disequilibrium. That's the gas in the tank.
So then step 2 has to be the brakes.
Step 2 is balancing forces. You need containment. In the brain, this is excitation versus inhibition. In society, it's, say, competition versus cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
If you have drive without containment, you get an explosion. If you have containment without drive, you get stagnation.
So it's a constant push-pull dynamic. You need the pressure, but you also need the walls to hold it.
Precisely. Then you introduce step 3, feedback loops. This is your steering wheel.
Okay.
You have positive feedback, which amplifies a change.
Like when you're learning a new skill and, getting it right makes you want to do it even more.
Exactly. That's growth. And then you have negative feedback,
Hmm.
which corrects errors and stabilizes the system. It sort of dampens the signal so things don't spin completely out of control.
And when those three things, the drive, the balance, the feedback, when they all work together.
You get step 4, synergy.
Ah, the magic moment.
This is the magic moment. It's when all the individual parts cooperate to do something that none of them could possibly do alone. A single neuron isn't conscious, but you put billions of them together in a synergistic state
Hmm.
regulated by feedback, and suddenly you have mind.
But synergy can be temporary, can it? I mean, I can have a moment of total clarity, a synergistic moment,
Yeah.
and then lose it 10 minutes later.
Which leads to the most critical step, and it's the one most people overlook, iterative consolidation.
Iterative consolidation. That sounds like corporate speak for saving your file.
It's actually a perfect description of it. Synergy is fluid, consolidation is structural. It's the process of turning a behavior into a solid building block.
Okay, can you give me a real-world example of this whole cycle? Because right now it's still feeling a little abstract.
Sure, think about learning to play the piano. When you start, you are in high disequilibrium. It's just chaos. Your fingers are clumsy, sounds terrible, you're stressed out, you're expending a massive amount of energy just to find middle C.
And using feedback, right, hearing the wrong notes and trying to correct it.
Right, and eventually you hit a moment of synergy. You play the scale perfectly. But you're not a pianist yet.
Oh.
You have to repeat that scale over and over and over. That's the iteration until it consolidates. It becomes a hard-coded module in your brain.
You stop thinking about where your fingers go. It just becomes automatic.
Exactly. The chaos has become order. And because that block is now solid, you can stand on it to reach the next level of complexity. You can start learning jazz.
Right.
You couldn't play jazz while you were still struggling with the scales because your system was just too busy handling that basic disequilibrium.
So complexity is basically a tower. You pour the concrete, you let it set. That's the consolidation. And then you build the next floor on top of it.
And this is what connects the physics to the psychology. The mind is doing this constantly. It's taking the chaos of the world, processing it through feedback, and consolidating it into what we call personality.
Which brings us to the second paper, the standard model of the mind. This is where things get really, really interesting for me, because they stop talking about neurons and start talking about who we are. And they use physics terms to do it.
It's a very powerful analogy. They argue that human behavior follows the old Newtonian formula. Force equals mass times acceleration.
Right.
But in the mind, mass isn't weight. It's your talent, your inherent capacity.
Wait, let's unpack that. Why is talent mass?
Right.
Usually we think of talent as something, light and active. Mass implies weight, inertia, drag.
Think of it exactly as inertia. If you have a massive amount of talent, say, extremely high intelligence or some huge creative potential, you have a lot of psychological mass. And it actually takes more force to get that mass moving.
Wow, that actually explains a lot. We all know that brilliant person who just seems stuck. They have all this potential, but they can't seem to do anything with it.
Exactly. Mass is value neutral. It's just potential. A boulder at the top of a hill has a lot of potential energy, but until you push it, it's just a rock. To get performance, to get acceleration, you need to apply energy.
And in this model, energy is what exactly?
Psychological forces, your drives, your motivations. Behavior is simply the result of your motivations pushing against the mass of your talent.
Okay, so let's map this territory out. Most of our listeners have probably heard of the big 5 personality traits, right? Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, and agreeableness.
Right. So in this standard model, they treat those traits as the coordinates of your mass. They sort of define the shape of your potential. But, and this is a huge shift, they kick agreeableness out of the club.
I noticed that. They say agreeableness isn't a trait. Why?
Because being agreeable, being kind, cooperative, good, it isn't a static thing you have, like intelligence. It's a force you have to apply.
Ah.
They moved it from the mass category to the energy category.
That fundamentally changes how you view personality. It implies that being a good person actually requires active energy expenditure. It's not just how you're built. It's work.
It is work.
Yeah.
And it's work because that force of kindness is constantly battling other darker forces. This is where the model gets, well, pretty dramatic. It describes the mind as a battlefield of opposing energies.
The war within. And they break these forces down into 2 teams, the dark tetrad and the positive forces. Let's look at the opposition first, the dark tetrad.
These are the fundamental negative drives. And I want to be clear here. These aren't just bad habits. These are primal structural forces that come from our survival instinct. First, you have greed.
Which isn't just about money, is it?
No, it's insatiable desire. It's the drive for self-interest above the collective. Then you have violence.
Which they link to that Thanatos instinct, the death drive.
Aggression, destruction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Then manipulation, Machiavellianism. This is strategy just completely stripped of empathy, using people as tools.
And the fourth one really surprised me, apathy.
Yes.
I mean, usually we think of apathy as just doing nothing, laziness. But the paper lists this as a force. How can doing nothing be a force?
That is such a common misconception. In this framework, apathy isn't just the absence of energy, it is the active resistance to connection.
Wow.
It's an anti-bonding force. It's the coldness that allows you to walk past someone in distress and feel nothing. You have to build a wall to be apathetic. That wall takes energy to maintain.
So it's a shield against empathy.
Exactly. And here's the scary part. These forces are present in everyone. Even the most virtuous person has to expend energy to push back against greed or apathy. It's a constant dynamic equilibrium.
So who are the heroes in this story? What are the positive forces pushing back?
So these are the virtues. First, truth. The drive for reality, for honesty. It directly opposes manipulation.
Okay. And kindness.
Compassion, altruism. This is the force that fights back against greed and apathy.
Beauty.
Harmony and creation. It opposes violence and entropy. And finally, understanding. Wisdom, curiosity.
So if I'm getting this right, my personality isn't some fixed statue. It's more like a conversation or maybe an argument between these forces all pushing on my talent.
And it's regulated by conscientiousness. Think of conscientiousness as the governor or the executive control system. It's the referee in the ring.
Okay, let's simulate this to make it more concrete. Let's build a profile. Imagine a leader with massive mass, super high IQ, tons of talent, and they have a huge drive for greed, ambition, accumulation.
Okay, high mass, high energy. They are going to move fast. Now, if they have low truth and low kindness, forces to balance all that out.
You get a bulldozer.
You get a runaway loop. The ambition just feeds on itself. Without the balancing force of truth to say, hey, that's not real, or kindness to say, hey, you're hurting people, this system just accelerates until it crashes. And this brings us right back to the complexity theory we started with.
Right, because we talked about how systems break. The source material lists these specific pathologies, ways the engine fails, and they map perfectly onto mental health.
They really do. The first failure mode is collapse.
That's when the system just can't handle the flow anymore.
Exactly. In a star, it collapses when it runs out of fuel. In the mind, we call it burnout or neurodegeneration. The structure just can't hold the tension of the disequilibrium anymore, so it loses its complexity. It shuts down.
Then there's fragmentation.
This is a loss of synergy. Remember, synergy is when the parts all work together to create a whole. When that fails, the parts stop talking to each other.
Cognitively, that sounds a lot like schizophrenia.
Exactly. Or dissociative identity disorder. The self isn't a unified thing anymore. It's just fragmented parts acting independently. Socially, we see this in extreme polarization. The left hand stops talking to the right hand, and the society loses its ability to function as a complex whole.
And the third one is the runaway loop. We just touched on this with the greedy leader.
Unchecked positive feedback. This is such a crucial concept. Positive feedback amplifies a signal. In the brain, a panic attack is a classic runaway loop.
Oh, yeah.
Anxiety feeds anxiety, which feeds physical symptoms like a racing heart, which then feeds more anxiety. It just spins out of control because the negative feedback, the calming mechanism, has failed.
Or a stock market bubble.
Same exact mechanic. Irrational exuberance. Everyone buys because everyone else is buying. There's no truth force, no reality check until the whole bubble just bursts.
So the fix isn't to remove the stress. It goes all the way back to that first insight. Tension is necessary.
Correct. Health isn't the absence of tension. Health is dynamic equilibrium. It's having strong enough balancing forces, strong enough truth and kindness to contain the greed and violence, allowing you to ride that wave of disequilibrium without crashing.
This framework feels like you could apply it to basically everything, but the source material makes a hard pivot at the end to a very specific, very urgent application: artificial intelligence.
This is where the rubber really meets the road. Because right now we are building systems AI that have massive mass.
Yeah.
Huge capacity, huge compute.
But do they have any forces?
Well, that's the problem. Current AI has high mass, but its drives are undefined, or worse, unintentional.
The source mentions the risk of an AI just defaulting to greed.
Right. And not greed for money necessarily, but optimization greed. If you tell an AI to maximize clicks or maximize efficiency and you don't give it any other forces to balance that out, it will pursue that metric at all costs.
So it basically becomes a high-functioning psychopath.
Exactly. High capacity, single-minded drive, and zero empathy.
So how do we apply this standard model to AI then?
The proposal is that we cannot just host that good behavior emerges from intelligence. We have to explicitly program the positive forces into the architecture itself.
So we have to literally code in truth.
Constraints against hallucination and deception. It shouldn't just be about, is this answer pleasing to the user? It has to be, is this answer real?
And kindness.
Do no harm, but also beneficence. Optimization for user well-being, not just for engagement metrics.
And booty. That seems incredibly abstract to try and code.
It is hard. But in this context, beauty means optimization for harmony. It means looking for solutions that aren't just efficient, but are elegant and sustainable. It's the complete opposite of the move fast and break things violence.
It's terrifying to think that we might be building entities with the mass of a god and the forces of a toddler.
Intelligence without values is dangerous. That's true for a human leader, and it's true for a machine learning model. If we don't understand the physics of these forces, we're going to get crushed by the mass.
Wow. This has been a lot to digest. Let's try to land the plane here. We started with this idea that we are open systems. We are surfing this wave of chaos.
We are, and we are defined by how we balance on that board.
Our talent is just the board itself, but the ride is determined by the forces. We have the dark tetrad pushing us toward greed and apathy.
And we have the positive forces pushing us toward truth and kindness. And remember the mechanism. Iterative consolidation. This is the empowering part. Every time you choose to listen to the kindness force over the apathy force, you are consolidating that pattern. You are literally building a structural module in your mind.
You're actively rewiring your own physics.
Exactly. Complexity isn't accidental, it's generative. We are generating ourselves moment by moment, choice by choice.
That's the takeaway for me. We aren't static statues. We are engines.
Engines that need maintenance, fuel, and most importantly, a really good steering wheel.
I want to leave you with a thought that's been nagging at me since I read these papers. If the mind really is just forces acting en masse, just physics playing out in psychology, then is our personality just an emergent property of a balancing act?
It's a humbling question, for sure.
And if we can identify our own dark forces, can we consciously engineer the positive forces to change our own trajectory? Or, and here's the scary part, is our mass sometimes just too heavy to move? Are we stuck with the inertia we were born with?
That's the ultimate question of free will, isn't it? Can the pilot override the plane?
Something to think about while you're surfing the disequilibrium today. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.